Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's live stream. For those of you students who know who I am, we're happy that you guys tuned in. We love you guys, we miss you like crazy, and we cannot wait until we're back together again soon. So for those of you guys who do know who I am, welcome. For those of you guys who have never tuned in to a live stream before, students, parents who have maybe never met me, my name is Jordan. I am one of the youth ministers here at Vertical Reality, which is the youth ministry of Resurrection Life. So on behalf of myself and Andrea Bongiovanni and Ronnie Smith, who are the other youth ministers, we just want to give you guys a very big and warm welcome. So tonight, to start off our message, I want to start out this evening by telling you a little story. You know, watching this right now, you might not know me very well, but as you get to know me, you will very quickly find out that I am a huge football guy. Ever since I was a little kid, about 5 or 6 years old, playing pee-wee football for the town team, I have been all about the game of football. In large part, I grew to love football because my dad loved it. And I continued to play all through middle school and high school. You know, part of the reason why I loved the game so much is because of that feeling that I got on game day. You know, there was just something special, like something sacred almost, about running out onto that field with your team, you know, dressed in game day uniforms, going out to battle the opponent standing on the other sidelines. You know, football is a team game, and it teaches you how to be part of something much bigger than yourself. Football shows you that life isn't all about you and that you're a part of the team. And when you're a part of the team, your decisions matter because what you do and don't do affects everyone else around you who's counting on you to do your job. See, I remember when I learned those lessons the hard way, playing football for the high school my freshman year. You see, one day when we were on our way back from one of our games, a few guys on the team decided to use some chewing tobacco that one of them had snuck onto the bus in his backpack. I'm sure they figured, you know, no harm, no foul. But that was until they had accidentally left the empty chewing tobacco container and their spit bottles on the back of the bus when we got back to the locker room. Now, obviously, it is not only illegal for a minor to have possession of tobacco products, but it also using it on school property is an even greater offense. It didn't take long for the school bus driver to find the evidence left in the bus, and it took even less time for the driver to call up our coach and tell him the news about what some of our teammates had done. The next day we got to practice, and our coach was livid, and rightfully so. He screamed at us for what seemed like 30 minutes plus, and then he told us that he was going to find out exactly who it was who used that chewing tobacco on the back of the bus. See, practice continued on like normal, but at the end he had us all line up on the sidelines, and that meant one thing and one thing only: suicides. He told us that the entire team would run until the people who had used the chewing tobacco had confessed. We started running, and we ran, and we ran, and ran, and ran. And for easily an hour straight, we did not stop running suicides. For those of you guys who have ever seen the movie Miracle about the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, it was kind of like Herb Brooks blowing that whistle again and again and again. By the end of it, we were exhausted and we were angry and we were sweating like pigs. But the guys who actually did use the chewing tobacco in the back of the bus never confessed to it. Ultimately, the coach never actually did find out who did it because they never manned up to the consequences of what they did. And in the process, their decisions weighed on the entire team, everyone on that team. And it wasn't pretty. So why do I tell you this? Well, that's a good question, and I'm glad you asked. I tell you this story because the title of tonight's message is Set Apart. And tonight we are going to be talking quickly about holiness. See, oftentimes when we think about the concept of holiness, or when we think about the word holiness, what comes to mind is images of glowing white lights and angels floating peacefully on the clouds, and a place like heaven is normally pictured that has, streets of the streets that are paved with pure gold, and for some reason there's always an ominous white mist literally everywhere that you can't see, but that kind of makes it more holy, I guess. But to me, holiness looks a lot less like that picture of heaven or those pictures that pop into our minds. And holiness to me looks a lot more like a football team. And I'm going to tell you why. If you would turn to 1 Peter chapter 2 and verses 9 through 10, that's where we're going to be camping out for the next few minutes here. This is what Peter writes in chapter 2, verses 9 through 10. He says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." You see, these three words that that Peter uses here when he writes are chosen, royal, and holy. I want to break those down really quick. And we're going to start with chosen. See, from the original Greek, what that word chosen means is handpicked, personally appointed, specifically selected, sought after, and reserved. So when God chose us, he picked us himself, like a gym class lineup, and we're the ones that he picked. We are the ones that he called. We're the ones that he wanted. Peter goes on to write that we are a royal priesthood. And that word royal means to be used for a high status, not the bottom shelf type of goods, but the kind of goods that are reserved to be put behind the glass case with the lights shining on it, and it's beautiful and expensive for everybody to see and to just be in awe of. That's who we are, a royal priesthood. And then he goes on to say a holy nation. And that word holy, what it means is to be set apart, exclusively owned by God, to be pure, to be sinless, to be upright, and to live a life that is whole and authentic. You know, at first glance, when we read this, it's easy to miss one of the most important points Peter's trying to make here. Peter isn't talking about us as individuals. Peter here is addressing the entire church. Yes, it's true that the things that he says that are true, the things that he says here are true about you individually. But more importantly, they are true about us collectively as followers of Jesus. Peter says in verse 10, "Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God." That means that you and me, we're a part of the team. When God chose you, when he called you out and invited you in, it wasn't an invitation to a party of two. It was an invitation to be part of something so much bigger than that. To be part of something so much bigger than yourself. But here's the rub. When you're called to be part of the team, when you're called out of darkness and into light, your actions are no longer just about you, but they weigh on the rest of the team around you. That is why just one chapter earlier in 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 14 through 16, Peter writes, "As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all that you do. For it is written, 'Be holy, because I am holy.'" To be holy, just as God is holy, is to live the kind of life that Jesus lived. To live the kind of life that we were always meant to live. One of my favorite authors calls this living in wholeness. And he says that living in wholeness is when the way of your being matches the truth of your being. In other words, we live that holy life that God asks us to live when what we do reflects the truth of who we were created to be at the very core of who we are. But the path to living in wholeness is the path that leads to the cross. When we no longer have our hearts set on ourselves, but when we give ourselves up for the good of those around us. This is why Peter writes in chapter 2 and verse 9 that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. We truly live as people who are set apart when we live this kind of life, in the freedom of a life that doesn't revolve around ourselves and isn't so tangled up in the sin that the world is so accustomed to. We declare the praises of God who called us to be a part of his team when we live the life of the cross, a life that the world does not know. We shine like a light in the darkness when we walk in wholeness, because an empty and hurting world will take notice of a life like that. It's just like we talked about a couple weeks ago in 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12. That you as young men and young women are called to lead by living this kind of life. And the best part about it is that you are never alone. Because just like a football team, you always have the church right beside you to pick you up when you stumble and to fight alongside you when you step onto that battlefield of faith. We, ladies and gentlemen, are called to be set apart. And what that means is to be called to be a team, to live the life that Jesus lived by the power of the Holy Spirit within us, in order that we may show the entire world how good our God is and how great the gift that he has given us really is. So starting tonight and continuing for the next 5 days, we are going to be reading a devotional series on the YouVersion app called Set Apart. And we're going to dig even deeper into what it means to be that royal priesthood, that holy nation, God's chosen people, set aside for God himself. And so as we comment and as we comment on each other's comments this week, I hope that you guys just continue to dig in and grab hold of all that God has for you in the Bible this week. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in. Again, we love you like crazy, and we cannot wait until we're back together. As soon as we have any news, we will let you guys know. But for now, we will see you next week at 7 p.m. next Tuesday. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We love you guys.